Well, the 2024 presidential race has entered a new phase after President Biden addressed the nation last night from the Oval Office.
I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation. You know, there is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. But there's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices.
Biden touted his record as president, listing a series of accomplishments. And the Harris campaign, meanwhile, awaits a possible endorsement from another major Democrat. They released their first campaign video earlier today.
In this election, we each face a question. What kind of country do we want to live in?
The video, titled "We Choose Freedom," features the hit song "Freedom" by Beyonce. Vice President Harris delivered the keynote speech just a little bit ago at the American Federation of Teachers Convention in Houston, Texas. The AFT is the first labor union to formally endorse her candidacy. And we are following the latest as well on the campaign of former President Donald Trump and his running mate, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Our team of reporters are covering every angle of this race. Katrina Kaufman has the latest from the Trump campaign. Ed O'Keefe is tracking the reaction to the president's Oval Office address. And later, we'll talk to Congresswoman Susan Delbene about Kamala Harris's impact on down-ballot races. But we're going to begin first in Houston, Texas, with CBS News White House reporter Willie James Inman. He is covering the vice president's campaign event. So let's go ahead and talk about this endorsement that came from the AFT. We heard in her speech a lot of lines that really seemed to resonate with the audience there. We're fighting for the future, that we want a future where no teacher has to struggle with student loan debt. She repeated that teachers are not paid enough. And then she went in, she sort of said what I imagine will be a reoccurring line for her. We want to ban assault weapons. They want to ban books. Talk to us about the reaction to her speech.
Hey there, Lana. Good to be with you from Houston, Texas. Well, it was an electric crowd here as the vice president gave her remarks that wrapped up just a little while ago. She talked about the stark choice before the nation as she sees it as the top of the ticket and the likely presumptive Democratic nominee. She said we can choose freedom, compassion, rule of law, or chaos, fear, and hate. And that's something that she essentially is labeling on the Trump campaign, the former president's campaign. And that ad you just played that uses the famous song from Beyonce, who, of course, is from the state of Texas, where the president talked to this crowd today. That song not only talks about freedom, but the ad mentions former President Trump, not necessarily by name, but it has a litany of photos with the former president, including that famous mugshot of the former president. So the vice president talking to this crowd, talking about the right to be able to choose, referring to abortion rights, which is something that she has talked about time and time again on the campaign trail on the Biden-Harris ticket. But Vice President Harris coming out swinging today at this event and lighting up this crowd. There were some signs saying Kamala Harris for president, but also signs that I'll note said, "Thank you, President Biden," giving a nod to President Biden as he dropped out of the race this week, Lana.
All right, and in the moments that I have you still, talk to us about, in addition to the AFT's endorsement, what other big pending endorsements is the Harris campaign looking for?
Yeah, this endorsement is certainly important. It's some 1.8 million members, but we are also waiting to see what former President Obama has to say about this race. That's a key endorsement that we are waiting to hear about. We've seen other political leaders like former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi endorse Kamala Harris's campaign. She's had endorsements from top Democratic governors across the nation and other leaders both in the Senate and the House. But that President Obama endorsement could be a key one to come. We also seen an endorsement from the Clintons, I'll mention, not to forget some of the important heavy hitters in terms of that support that has been building for the vice president's campaign for President, Lana.
All right, Willie James Inman there for us in Houston. Thank you. Former President Donald Trump took to social media to criticize both the vice president and President Joe Biden. After a campaign rally in Charlotte, North Carolina, Trump criticized President Biden's address last night, calling it, quote, barely understandable. He also took to Truth Social, sharing posts that highlighted some of the jabs that he took at Kamala Harris. He posted, quote, "Crooked Joe Biden and lying Kamala Harris are a great embarrassment to America. There has never been a time like this." Attorney and CBS News campaign reporter Katrina Kaufman has more from Palm Beach, Florida. Katrina, so some of the things that Trump is calling Harris now include lunatic, radical. This also follows Senator Vance's comments earlier this week attacking her for not having biological children, calling her, quote, "a childless cat lady." Talk to us about the strategy of the Trump campaign and whether the rest of the party is supporting this tactic.
Trump is really trying to frame Kamala Harris as this ultra-liberal leftist candidate. He sees her as an extension of Biden, but as even more to the left than him. And he's really trying to emphasize that for voters. When I was at his rally in Charlotte, North Carolina last night, that point really seems to be hitting home. That was the rhetoric that I got back from a number of the voters that I interviewed at the rally. But the party wants to stay away from this extreme language. There was a meeting the other day where House Speaker Mike Johnson said that this should be about policies, not personalities. They're worried about the fact that they're running up against a woman, someone who could be the first Black and South Asian president, and they don't want to turn off key demographics in swing states, such as suburban women and Black voters.
Let's talk a little bit about the vice presidential candidate on the Republican side, J.D. Vance. A new CNN poll suggests he is the least liked vice presidential candidate in decades. What we see, though, from the crowds that he speaks before, they are enthusiastic about him. Help us to reconcile how Republican voters are feeling about J.D. Vance and whether or not he's going to be a boost to Trump's White House bid.
I mean, he is not polling well, but he obviously does have some support within the party. Some people seem excited about him, and others that I've spoken with seem like they're still sort of being convinced that he was the right choice. It's also important to remember that Trump made this selection before he knew for sure that Biden was dropping out of the race and that they were actually running up against Harris. It's very possible that had they known, they might have made a different pick here.
All right. And then in the last couple of moments, talk to us about what's next on the campaign trail for Trump and Vance this week.
They're going to have a joint rally in Minnesota on Saturday. And before that, Trump has a busy schedule. Tomorrow morning, he's going to be meeting with Netanyahu here in Palm Beach at Mar-a-Lago, right next to where I am now. And then in the evening, he's going to be the keynote speaker at a religious summit. It's called the Believers Summit, also here in Palm Beach. And then on Saturday afternoon, before his rally with Vance, he's going to be the keynote speaker at the Bitcoin convention in Nashville.
All right, Katrina Kaufman for us in Palm Beach, Florida. Thanks, Katrina. President Biden addressed the nation from the Oval Office last night, discussing his decision to drop out of the 2024 election.
It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. But in the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think it's more important than any title. But this sacred task of perfecting our union is not about me. It's about you, your families, your futures. It's about we, the people.
Biden also celebrated his record as president, listing a series of accomplishments and calling on Americans to, quote, preserve our democracy. Biden suggested that in this election, the soul of America is on the line. CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe joins us from the White House. So, Ed, talk to us about what the president was hoping to accomplish and whether or not he was successful in this speech.
Well, he had said, Lana, that he would expand on and explain why it is he ultimately decided to go. Didn't directly address that in this speech, but did hint to the fact that he understands that there is a desire now for the next generation and younger voices to lead the country, believing that now is the time for that. So whether it took him 3 weeks to realize that or whether he'd realized it all alone is unclear. Didn't specify that in the speech. But he also laid out what exactly he wants to do with his remaining 6 months. Talked a lot about fighting gun control, climate change, restoring abortion rights, voting rights, civil rights, dealing with cancer, and making sure there's more federal funding to fight it. and then hinted at a forthcoming plan to revamp the U.S. Supreme Court, which he had already hinted at when he was still a candidate, and is something that is eagerly sought by the Democratic Party's base. So lots in this speech, probably written mostly with history in mind and how it would be viewed years from now, but a pretty good synopsis of what he believes he'd done, arguing that perhaps he should have been reelected, but understanding that his party wants to go in a different direction.
So, Ed, there's still lots on the president's to-do list that he articulated to America. How much time is he going to be spending out on the campaign trail?
Well, he had said on Monday when he joined Vice President Harris for a call and an appearance with campaign staffers up at the headquarters in Wilmington, Delaware, that he would be out there for her. We have no sense yet of what that might entail. Does he go to fundraisers? Does he go to campaign events? Does he cut ads for her? Does he do interviews on her behalf? All of it yet to be determined. There's so many things, so many details that still have to be worked out as she takes over this campaign. For example, I was checking out the websites today. JoeBiden.com now essentially redirects to KamalaHarris.com, which is being completely rebuilt, but has a big prominent "You can donate here" button on it, as they sort of lay out her ideas on what exactly she would do about all these issues and whether there's any daylight between what the president has done and was proposing to do and what she would want to do as president.
All right, Ed O'Keefe for us from the White House. Thanks, Ed.